Hello, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching The Broken Meeple, a show where I rant and rave about board games, but usually more the latter. Yeah, hang on, you're stealing the limelight here. Yeah, we're talking about a rather big one today. This is Beyond the Base Game for Deep Rock Galactic, and as you can see, I've got quite a bit of the collection here. Somewhat ridiculous, yes. As people may remember from the review I did last year, I think it was actually, by all means go check it out, I gave Deep Rock Galactic a 10 out of 10. This was basically what I wanted in not only a scenario skirmish game that didn't require you to play it as a campaign, but just in a video game port that was faithful to the source material. All these things, Deep Rock Galactic was like the best one I have come across, and it deserved its 10 out of 10 rating, and its like seal of distinction I would still happily paste on the box right now. So naturally, when the expansions came out, I was actually willing to get on that Kickstarter, and yes, I don't bid on many Kickstarters anymore, so the fact that I was willing to actually pay a fair amount of money for these, I gotta admit, they're not cheap. You know, these have the miniatures in them and they're quite pricey, these expansions, but I was like, yep, I definitely want to get in these and I want to see what they all are. So I have got the two add-ons here, the Bolt Detonator and the Corlock Tyrant Weed. I'll talk about those a little bit later, but I've mainly got to talk about these two, Biome Expansion and Space Rig. They add different things apiece. They are combined by way of mission types that can use the assets from both of them, but there are some key differences between the two. This one effectively adds different like landscapes for the mine, so you can have, like from the video game, you can have like the toxic world and the lava world and the and stuff like that, and the funky weird pixie dust world, not sure what they would call it, and an ice world. So these different terrains have different effects, they have like different hazards that you have to deal with, and it just adds some cool variety, as well as a few extra creatures, one of which hasn't even appeared in the video game, and some more missions, and just generally a lot of cool stuff. The Space Rig adds a couple of new mission types for the Drill Dozer and the Liquid Morkite, of which, I must admit, in the video game, the Drill Dozer is probably one of my lesser favourite mission types, but I actually quite like the Liquid Morkite one. You have to like get pipes to these different pump jacks and send it into a refinery, and it's a really cool mission type in there. It takes a while, but it also adds a way of doing kind of like a 4-mission campaign, which granted, campaigns are not the first thing I really wanted for this game, but we already had the deep dive mechanic from the original, so it's like, okay, we'll see what this one's like. So I'm going to basically go through each box in turn, talk about what I like and don't like, and give you a rating at the end.
Hold on to your beard!
Okay, let's talk Biome first. So the first thing you'll notice is that there's a bunch of tiles that are double-sided to represent the different terrains. Each one is contained within the main rulebook, which thankfully for the second edition they've made these A4, proper decent quality rulebooks, and even the main rulebook's been upgraded, so they are a lot easier to read. But this one essentially gives you a lot of cool stuff to vary the game. It doesn't add much in the way of complexity. It's just like, right, were you a bit bored with the plain look of the caves before? Do you want a few extra creatures? Do you want another mission type? Then here you go. This one kind of is a collection of all things great. But you'll recognize these from the game. So you've got the ice world where you can go slide around on the big ice patches. You've got the little the danger of hypothermia, as well as those little sort of almost kind of like hot springs that you've got to go find. But then flip it over and you've got the lava side, which is kind of one of my favorite type of levels in the game actually, where you've got lava bits that basically hurt you if you wander over them, but you've also got little sort of volcano geysers that erupt and can hurt you as well as kill creatures, which is quite handy. You've got the little pod things that you shoot and they explode, so again, very useful. They're, in the video game, it's good to get bugs close to them and then pop them open. You've got to use tactics to survive. But you then also have the toxic world, which is kind of one of the more annoying terrain types to get, because it's not that it's not fun to play, but it's hazardous. You've got poison pods that hurt you when you go near them. You've got the explodey pods, as I mentioned. And worst of all, you've got sticky goo, which is a nightmare to get across. So yeah, the toxic world is quite a dangerous one. And then finally, you've got one of the more newer types they put in, which I don't know really what to call it. Funky flora, funky fauna, pixie dust. I mean, what do they call it in here? I'm kind of curious, actually. So we've got magma core, we've got glacial strata, fungus bog, azure weald. Oh, I don't know. I just call it funky flora, pixie dust world or something. But, you've got little bits that don't cost you movement, and some little rock structures that emit weird effects, like you can't be stunned or anything. So this one's kind of like the more boring of the four, I would say. I much prefer ice, toxic, and lava to this one. This one kind of feels a little bit plain, like a little bit boring. But these ones are simple. Basically, the missions in here and in the combined book, if you get both expansions with the Kickstarter, you basically got a combined mission rulebook that houses both expansions. But you've got a lot of missions in here. I think like 18 missions in all the different difficulties that utilize this different terrain.
Smoking!
But you gotta fight some new creatures as well, so we got a few in the box here. We got the very annoying Corona Shellback. Well, it's a little bit easier to kill it in this game than it is in the video game. The video game, it rolls around like a giant ball with a crunchy shell, making it quite hard to blow apart, but also it likes to basically run you over. It's a little bit of a pain when they turn up in the game. Here it's not too bad. The other cool one that you get is you get the Stingtail, which is very annoying in the video game. It basically does a little screech and then hooks out its tail, grabs you and yanks you over to its position, at which point it then tries to bite you and, you know, stun you a little bit. It's kind of annoying in this game as well, but a little bit easier to take out than in the video game. But yeah, you gotta be careful when one of these is around, because it could yank you from where you need to be and straight into the realms of more bugs, which is never a good thing. The weird one in here is the Rammer. This Rammer doesn't exist in the video game, and I'm kind of curious why this one's in here, because every other creature in this entire set, with all the expansions and all the add-ons, exists in the video game. But this one doesn't. This one's entirely new. It's basically what you think it does when it's called Rammer. It's got a big hardened head, it charges in a straight line and tries to blat you across half the landscape. I mean, I would like to see one of these things in the video game. Maybe this is something that, you know, Ghost Ship Games are actually trying to put into the game soon in a future update. I'm all down for it, but yeah, it's just kind of weird to have a new creature in the game. They don't appear very often though, but, you know, they are there. But probably the most annoying one in here is this thing. Oh boy. Neosite Breeder. Hate this thing. This thing is basically a harmless thing by itself. It just flies around, it's like la 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 la, minding its own business. But what it does is that it lays these things, these little Neosite hatchlings. These come in like groups of 3, they're basically a swarm. They fly around, so you can kill them instantly with frozen weapons, which is quite handy. But they basically fly around and nom 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 you at close combat. But they are a pain, because they've got 3 wounds apiece to take them out, and 3 seems to be the magic number of damage that seems to be hardest to achieve. But this thing keeps laying them, and when they pop out, they're basically another 3 hit points worth of annoying creatures for you to deal with. When you see one of these in a game, you attack it early and you kill it fast. You do not leave this thing to pop out eggs, because you are going to really hate yourself if you don't. But yeah, I mean, that's good. It's a threat. It's a legit threat that you have to deal with, and given that you're trying to deal with other things at the same time, the fact you're also trying to focus all your fire on this thing, you know, and it's not the easiest thing to kill, is certainly a threat in itself. But yeah, you got a few extra enemies, and these will pop out either from mission setup or from like the setup, the swarm cards. There's swarm cards for each of them. But yeah, I mean, that's it for the creature side of things. After that, you've then got, as I said, more missions in the book, but you also have a new mission type, the mini mule mission. So in the game, you had to basically go find these little mules, find their legs, reattach them to the mules, and then repair a drop pod to get out of the actual level. Here, it functions pretty much the same. You find the mules on the map, the legs are spread out, you got to go get the legs, mine them out, put them back on the mule, and then eventually where the drop pod is, you have to spend a certain amount of actions and turns to basically repair it, all the while swarms are constantly coming at you. It's a fine, fairly easy level to throw in. It's not particularly complex in how it operates. It's essentially, right, we've got to do all the normal stuff, but then eventually for about, say, 2 rounds or so, you know, you're going to have to deal with mega swarms coming at you and then get on the drop pod and leave. It's a bit long-winded actually in the video game. I'm glad that it's a little bit shortened here. It's a fine mission. I'll happily play it if it turns up in the kind of random selection, but it's on a similar complexity level to the ones you've already seen in the base game.
Hello!
I almost forgot. No, you technically get 2 different mission types in here. In the Deep Rock Galactic main game, you got 1 elimination mission, which was just to go up against a Praetorian. Well, here, you get this guy. Oh, hello, Giant Dreadnought. Yep, you get to kill one of these dreadnoughts. And so you go through the map as normal, you find its egg, you pop it open, this massive beastie comes out, and then you have to basically try and take it down. It's got 15 hit points. You can't hurt it except from the back pretty much, and it has its own little mini deck of cards. You stop doing the normal event cards so you don't get more swarms. Instead, you have to deal with this thing sort of ramming you against the wall, or farting in your face. It does a weird gas attack, which is kind of weird, and sort of trying to protect itself. And once you've hurt it once, it kind of covers itself up, so you can't easily hurt it again. So you got to be a little bit careful about what you do. And it can get pretty claustrophobic in a cavern with this thing around, because this thing takes up most space that you have. This one is a little hit and miss though. I do find myself, occasionally you come across this thing and it causes a bit of bother, particularly if you've got multiplayer. But when you come across this thing solo, I find that I kind of wipe the floor with it. Like, it gets a point where it rams me against the wall, I run around past it, shoot it in the back, and then its next event card doesn't make it turn around and face me. So then I spend my whole next turn just going pop, 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 like crazy. So I feel that the difficulty scaling with this thing is a little bit too easy when you play it in solo mode versus when you play it in multiplayer. That's kind of like the slight downer I do have on it. Otherwise, I do like this as another mission type, and it is cool to finally beat up a dreadnought, and in the future you could have the other dreadnoughts from the video game, the Hive Guard and the two, I forget what they're called, but the ones that come as twins. It'd be cool to have those, actually, particularly the twins. I don't know how you would get the Hive Guard in this game. I think it would be a bit too clunky, but the two twins, I think that'd be pretty easy to do with their own little event deck. I'd love to see that. But yep, it's cool to have it as a new mission type. There's only so many of them, but again, you could design your own mission with it, and I'm just glad to have a giant miniature of a dreadnought. It looks freaking awesome.
Bloody hell, you're hot to kill!
I really like this expansion. It's just what I want an expansion to be. A lot of cool new additions without too much complexity, and just making my games a little bit more interesting. I'm giving this one a solid 10 as well. I think this is the expansion to grab first. Like, out of these two, I'm going to say it now, you've played Deep Rock Galactic, you really enjoy it, you want to grab the first expansion to make it more interesting, you grab Biome, okay? This is the one you gotta do. Now, I suppose, when I say 10, I don't mean that it's essential. You don't need to have this one. But, if you want to add more variety, I can't think of a better one to go with.
Carl would be proud!
So now we come to the Space Rig expansion, and we'll start with the small bits first. There's a few little tweaks before you get into the big stuff. First little tweak that I really like are these hidden caves. They come in, there's more than 2 of them, but I'm just grabbing these ones for example. They're basically hidden 3 hex segments that go on the board in the mission setup, and you discover them just like any other cave, but they're really small. They might have a creature, they might have a pit, but what they tend to have is some upgraded things to pick up. So imagine that you normally go around and find a loot bug. Well, here you can find the gold loot bug. Here you can find the stuff like the malt plants and and stuff like that, which allow you to, get cool bonuses during the game. So they're basically ways to find really cool stuff, but they usually require you to go a bit out of your way from the mission in order to get them. So are you willing to divert away from the mission in order to go grab the cool stuff? Well, that's entirely up to you. Very easy to include, and I really like them. There's more than 2. It's quite a fair selection. And the other small thing, well, I say small, it's pretty good variety, is that you get 12 more mission types in here, so you got plenty enough to play with using the new stuff from here. But we'll get on to the big stuff now. So firstly, we got 2 new mission types. The Drill Dozer, escort duty basically, and the Liquid Morkite. Now, you don't get a huge amount in the backs with this one, because the miniatures kind of take up a lot of space, and there's certainly a bit of wasted space there in terms of like plastic undercoating. But, these are still pretty sweet. So the Drill Dozer first. Not my favorite mission in the video game, I must admit, but I think it works quite well in this version. Basically, you have this giant tank here with a big drill on the end, and it plows in a straight line through the map and essentially carves a path towards this thing, the Armor Hearthstone. It's a giant shell that you have to crack, and it comes in 2 bits, which is quite amusing. The fact that when you actually pop this thing open, it's kind of like a giant Kinder Egg, where you can actually get the little Hearthstone mini and like take it out, almost like a little thing. I haven't got it on me, but you can see from the picture that it looks quite cool. But this thing will be on the map. The Drill Dozer finds its way to it, and all the while you've got to protect the Drill Dozer. So if the bugs aren't attacking you, they're attacking this thing, and it's only got 5 health. In the game, it can take a reasonable amount of damage before it dies. Here, it only takes 5 health. a few decent swarm attacks and this thing will blow up. And if it does, well, you lose. So you have this thing of you have to stay close to the drill dozer, but then sometimes you want to go away and, oh, those hidden caves are over there. I want to go grab some cool stuff. Uh-oh, swarm. Did anyone stay with the drill dozer? You know, like, get back and find it. And, you know, particularly in a solo game, this one can actually be quite tricky because it's hard to, in a solo mode, to go off and find cool stuff and still be able to get back for the drill dozer. It's a little bit manic. But it doesn't take long for it to get to its armor and hearthstone, and then once you're there, much like the Dreadnought I mentioned a minute ago, you essentially have a mini deck of events that you draw instead of the normal ones, and these do things like spawn a ton of enemies, or spawn these little beamer things that you get from the video game that shoot the drill dozer, and you basically go through until you've done 6 out of the 7 of these, and then you pop over the hearthstone, and you're good to go. Now, I like this mission more in the tabletop version, I think I do, than the video game, but I would have liked more variety with the armor and hearthstone cards. You use 6 out of 7, so there's not a huge amount of variety, and certainly the difficulty of this is going to be dictated a lot by which 6 you get. I mean, the first time I did it, it was pretty straightforward because I missed out on a very big, like, you know, what do you call it? Like, yeah, creature activation card that never came out. Instead, I got the beamers, which in solo mode I was able to deal with relatively quickly. But if you get all the stuff that spawns monsters like first before anything else, then suddenly you have got a ton of monsters on you before you're even able to like deal with them all. And the difficulty does kind of fluctuate a little bit with this, but then that's kind of the same with the video game. Sometimes you have an escort duty mission that goes nice and flawlessly, and other times you get to that very end and it just all goes to hell. You know, it can be like that. But I think thematically it's done very well. I think it's just a solid mission type. It takes a little bit of time because you've got to wait for the thing to actually get there, so you can't speed the mission up any more than it already is. But yeah, I kind of like this one. And I sort of kind of like the next one. Now, in the video game, I love the Liquid Morkite mission. It takes a long time, but I really like it because it's an interesting mission type. You have to deal with swarms while you build these 3 pipelines to these pump jacks. You've got to go find them first on the map, which is not difficult. It tells you where they are, but you've got to go uncover their cave segments. This will pop open, and then from your middle refinery, you have to build these pipe segments. They come in straights and curves, and there's plenty of them. But basically, you have to connect this up to the big refinery, which is just a tile token. Unfortunately, there's no miniature for it. It would be too big. But with these pipes come 2 things. Firstly, you can slide across them like skating or something, which is really cool, like in a video game. So that's a really cool way to, you know, solve your movement. But then you're having to deal with bugs spawning while you're doing this. So this is actually a relatively tricky mission to do, particularly in solo. Oh word. It's actually easier to control 4 characters and play this mission than it is to try and solo it, because you try to create 3 pipelines by yourself while dealing with creatures. Even with Bosco on your side, it's a pretty tall order. It takes a while. Now, I was able to do it when I did it, but man, I think I must have got lucky, or Bosco must have been MVP or something, because I was really like, blimey, I can't deal with these enemies. I'll pop, pop, pop. Right, can I get back to making the stupid pipe now? You know, it's quite tricky, and in the video game, trying to do this mission solo is a bit of a pain as well. This is a mission type that really does favor multiplayer, and honestly, if I'm playing this game with people who are semi-familiar with Deep Rock Galactic, or I know can handle the rules, rather than choose one of the novice missions for like Morkite digging or whatever, I might actually throw out a Liquid Morkite mission and get all 4 of us to do that, because that would be, you know, it's really cool when you do get other players to join in that one. But once you've got it going, you then basically have a setup where the Morkite goes through the pipes, and it has to start at the pump jack, and it takes a little while to get to the refinery. Of course, that depends how long your pipe is. You're the one who dictated how long it was. And, you know, while it's doing that, then swarms are coming out, but you're not drawing event cards. You basically just follow this step-by-step process. So it's a cool way to simulate it without needing its own event deck. And the thing I like with this, as well as with the Armor and Hearthstone mission and the Dreadnought mission, is that because you are not drawing from the main event deck, the swarm marker does not move. So the timer effectively freezes while you're doing the main event. So you haven't got to worry about the fact that like, oh yeah, we took so long with this and now we're at the main event and now we're just going to run out of time. No. Although if you get to the main event and you've only got literally 2 swarm movements left, It's going to be quite tense to get back to the ship without that thing running out. But I like the fact that it freezes that, because otherwise I think the missions would just be damn near impossible. So I like the Morkite mission. Better in the video game than I think it is here. But this one is definitely, I think, suited to a multiplayer experience. And to be honest, even the Armor and Hearthstone is kind of best suited to multiplayer. So for someone like me who's a solo player, that's a little bit of a downer. But I still like to play this with groups every now and again. And when that happens, I can actually bring out these two mission types and say, look, okay, we can do one of these two. They're great for multiple players. Which one do you fancy? So I'm all well for that.
One last mission, and then I'm founding my own brewery.
Right, now to get to the big thing. The space rig. This thing is a whole new way to play the game. It is basically a 4-mission campaign, and it's different enough in the deep dive, because deep dive I think you just literally did 3 missions in a row. Well, here you do 4 missions in a row, but you get a few upgrades and stuff along the way. Firstly, you get these 2 cards that go here, which basically represent like challenges. If you can achieve these challenges during the mission, this marker improves and you get more upgrades as the campaign goes on. So you get more throwing items, you get more rock and stone cards, but the 2 main things you're going for are gear upgrades, which allow you to actually get some solid upgrades for your character that are permanent, but you can also, as a nice touch, open the Abyss bar and get a drink. So all those drinks that you get in the video game where before the mission starts somebody buys a round of Tunnel Rat or whatever, or liquid or dark Morkite, you have a drink, say rock and stone, and get into the mission. Well, you get that here too. Annoyingly, you don't get to do it every mission. You get one at free at the start, and then you have to progress far enough off the track to unlock any further ones. And depending on which mission cards you get, it's kind of tricky. There are some in here which are easy enough to achieve during the round in like multiple steps, but there are some which are just damn near impossible. You know, you advance on the track if you kill 4 enemies in one go. 4? I mean, if you're swarmed by a ton of grunts, maybe, but there's not that many instances where I'm killing 4 enemies in one single turn. But then there's also others that just feel a lot harder than others. So the difficulty scaling of the upgrade path is heavily dictated by what cards will come out. The upgrades though are pretty sweet. I mean, you can get things like earning rock and stone cards when you pickaxe enemies, or having extra damage, extra health in that. So there's some really cool stuff you can do. The other thing it does is that you have a mission deck which allows you to shuffle all the different missions that are in all these books, so all these different mission books, and draw one at random. So you can randomly select what mission you're going to do, or you can just pick 4, whatever you did. I mean, when I first did this, I literally picked the 4 missions that introduced all the different elements of the expansions in one campaign, so I could test everything out. But it also meant that I'd learned everything before I taught it to anybody else. The thing I'm not the biggest fan of though is that you've got these 4 little hex symbols here, which are for modifiers to the level. They get harder as you go through the campaign, so there is a progression that's harder. And in the game you normally got, in the video game, you normally got these yellow things, yellow modifiers, which basically kind of helped you. Exploding bugs, low gravity, critical weak point. They were ones that actually made the level slightly easier. And then you got the red ones like lethal enemy and, lethal enemies and Swarmageddon and stuff like that, which make the game a lot harder. Well, here, they both make the game harder. Yellow adds a modifier which just affects the setting, but it's still making it harder. Like stalactites take double the hits to kill. The exits start with more grunts at the start of the game. They don't help you in any way. There's no low gravity. There's no critical weak point or exploding bugs. They just make the level slightly harder. And then the red ones make the level a lot harder. I mean, having grunts that hurt you like doubly easily, or having lethal enemies is bad enough. But oh my word. The O2 one. The tokens are in the box here. I wonder if I can get them out. Here we go. So, got the tray. Yep, with all the tokens, of which have been upgraded. But where are those O2 things? Here we go. This mechanic can go straight to hell. Oh my god. O2 is the most annoying modifier you can get in the video game. You have to basically constantly go back to the mule or resupply pod or your drop pod to load up on O2, because otherwise you'd slowly choke to death. It's a pain in the butt in any video game level you do. Here, it pretty much makes some missions, particularly in solo mode, impossible. And I do mean impossible. When you have this, you have 4 cubes on it, so to represent your O2 level before you have to get it back up. You don't choke to death and die like in a video game, which is good, but the problem is every single round you only get 2 actions instead of 3, unless you spend a cube from here. So you can have 4 turns in a row where you have 3 actions, otherwise you only get 2. Unless you go to a resupply pod, which means you have to actually get the nitro and gold, cool one down to refill this thing up. This is so annoying. Really annoying. I mean, firstly, anything that restricts the amount of actions you do hurts in this game. You need actions. Actions are paramount. To restrict them makes it so much harder. It also makes it less fun because you're not doing as much on your turn. I mean, if your turn is literally just to move twice, whoopee-doo, and it doesn't seem like much. The third action is key. But then on top of that, this thing is just so hard to fill up. I mean, you have to get a resupply pod quickly with this, but you might have a level set up where the nitro and gold's miles away. So what are you supposed to do? Just have restricted actions for ages? That's annoying. And you play this in solo mode? I mean, this turned up in the first Liquid Morkite mission I was doing, right? I played it for a short while and then immediately re-rolled because the mission was impossible. I could not deal with 3 pipelines and all the bugs and this stupid modifier constantly during my mission. I hate O2 and I honestly am never going to use it again. Now, thankfully, there's at least, what, like 5 or 6 of these red modifiers, so it's not a huge deal. But yeah, the problem with these modifiers is that they all hinder you, none of them help you, and they are a little bit imbalanced in how powerful they are. Some of them you're not too fussed about, but stuff like the O2 fundamentally changes the game and makes it pretty much impossible, or just not as fun, and I don't want to use them. Now, you don't generally use them in normal missions. This is only for the space rig board that you would use these, so thankfully I don't have to worry about them in a normal mission, but yeah, I think they just kind of up the challenge rating on this a little bit too much, and certainly they make it more swingy. You might have a mission with a red and a yellow, which it doesn't make that much difference to you, what the hell. But then you go on to the 2 red one, and suddenly the mission becomes so impossible that you're just like, well, what am I supposed to do? And if you fail a mission, all you do is replay it again. So there's no real stakes, and even when you end, it's just, well done, you completed it. Well done. Yay, we did it. It's like, that's it. So this is just basically a way to play 4 missions in a row with a few little modifiers along the way, and I don't know if I want to play it like this that often. Even solo, I'd rather just play a mission by itself. I'm done with having long campaigns, and this one is still long. I mean, it'll take you a couple of hours to go through each game, at least, of Deep Rock. So you're still talking anywhere between like even if you play super fast solo, you're talking anywhere with 6 to 10 hours worth of playtime here. And do you have 6 to 10 hours spare to play nothing but Deep Rock Galactic? I don't know, but I just feel like I would rather play the normal scenarios. But it's there if you want it. That's the thing. It's there if you want it. But overall with the Space Rig expansion, this one is a lot lesser than the Biome Expansion. The Biome Expansion, I think, is like the one to get. It's got lots of cool stuff. Doesn't add much complexity. This adds a little bit of complexity with regards to each game, as well as, the difficulty rating, and also just using this thing in general. I mean, the rules to it aren't particularly clunky, but there's more to keep track of. But I didn't really ask for a campaign setting, and so even though I've got this, I don't think I'll use it that often. But I do like the 2 new mission types. Escort Duty and Morkite, I think, are really good fun and good for multiplayer, so they are a solid entrance, as well as those little hidden caves. So this is a bit of a mixed bag. For the price you pay, there's a decent amount of content in this expansion that I'm not really going to use again, whereas there's some content that I will. This expansion, I think I'm going to give overall, I'd say, I do like the fact that I've got the 2 mission types in there, and I don't need the space rig to be able to use them. I'm giving this expansion a 7 out of 10 overall. It's good because I like the mission types and those hidden caves, and those are the main things I'm getting from this. But it loses those extra points because the space rig just isn't as good as it could have been, and it's just not something I feel like I want to play again. So you could argue maybe this should be a 6 or 7. I'm definitely hovering around that range, but this is kind of the expansion you want to get if you play it multiplayer a lot because of the 2 new mission types, or if you're really desperate to play it as a campaign setting. Otherwise, probably stick with Biome and get that one first and wait till last to get this one.
Oh man, that went tits up fast.
So the last thing we've got is a couple of mini expansions. I'm just going to briefly mention these. These are add-ons basically. One of them I really like, one of them I'm not as big a fan of. So we'll start with the one that I like, which is this one. Bolt Detonator. This is cool when it appears in the video game, this massive sort of like dreadnought sized thing with bulbous pustules on it, and you blow those things up, and eventually once you get it down to 0 health, which takes a while, it takes a fair few hits, it like boom, massive explosion and takes out half the terrain around it. Here, same thing. It pops up, you gotta deal with it, and eventually it will blow up and take out 2 hexes worth of radius around it, which seems kind of minor. That's the only thing I have against this. When you blow this up in the game, it takes out a solid chunk of the map. You don't want to be anywhere near this thing. 2 hexes radius of this thing isn't really that much. I mean, you can kind of get out of its radius pretty easily. But it is cool when you use this to blow up a lot of other bugs and stuff, and it's not complex, it's just a swarm card. You know, it takes out cave walls as well, so it can really reshape the level. But I like it when this thing appears. It's a cool new addition, easy add-on. I really like it. So it's a good thematic inclusion. This one, though, not so much. This thing is annoying when it turns up in the video game, and it's doubly annoying when it turns up here, because in the video game, it's a pain to take out. You have these little sprout weeds that appear, and a big bulb with a core in the middle that you got to take out. But the problem is you have to kill the sprouts, which then opens up the core. Briefly, you then shoot at the core, it closes, sprouts come up again, you gotta retake them all over again, except on top of that you then have healing pods which heal the core unless you take them out early. The amount of times I played the video game where people don't take out those healing pods early, but crying out loud, have you not played this game before? Same thing in here. Healing pods, the sprouts, and the weed. And basically it turns up in one of those hidden segments, you know, the big segments that you set up on the map. So you might just get an ordinary cave, but you might be in the middle of a mission, and it's like, oh, barely got any ammo, gotta get this done, this mission's taken a fair while, let's get it under wraps, and then you flip over the Tyrant weed. Great. And you don't have to take it out. I mean, that is the thing, you can just ignore it. But if you're trying to get certain objectives around, like the objective tokens and that, and you have to run into the same location as this, it's going to hurt you quite easily. And taking it out just takes quite a lot of time to hit the sprouts and hit the pods and deal with the core. It just sucks up time, and, you know, sucks up time and ammo for something that's cool, I guess. You get some decent rewards from it, but that's kind of it, really. I mean, I just kind of don't feel like I want to attack this thing when I see it. I'm like, oh, for crying out loud, I've already got to deal with all these bugs and this mission. I ain't got time to spend ages killing this thing. And so, you know, when it does turn up, you almost want to like re-flip the tile. Like, oh, I don't like that tile. Can we have a different one? Especially with multiplayer where this thing can take a while anyway. So, not my favorite. This is one that I can safely ignore or pretty much will never really use. It's an add-on. I think that if you were to get the whole set, you're getting this purely for completeness, but I personally would skip this one. So if I was to give this one a solid 9 out of 10 and say that for an add-on, I think this is a really cool add-on to have, this one I'd probably give more 5 or 6 tops. You know, it's an average thing. If you want it, you want a bit of extra difficulty, you want to actually take one of these things out in tabletop, then by all means go ahead. But otherwise, I'm kind of like, nah, it's an add-on that I could have happily skipped and not really cared. Whew. There you go. That is everything Deep Rock Galactic with the expansion. So 10 out of 10 for Biome. Biome is brilliant. You should definitely pick this one up as the first expansion you do if you like this game. Ooh, put it here for a minute. Space Rig, 6, 7 out of 10. I'm saying 7 overall because I think the mission types and the cave segments are great. But it loses marks because I don't think the Space Rig is that particularly great, and I would rather just play this as a single skirmish mission. So I honestly don't know when I'm going to play the Space Rig thing again, and that's some wasted components that are just going to sit in a box and never really get used. And then you got some add-ons if you want to add them.
Hurry up! I'm not getting any younger!
This feels like Deep Rock Galactic complete. love it, want to keep playing it, and by all means check out my original review I did where I talk about why I love this game so much. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when they go live on the page. Don't forget to check out the rest of the content I've been doing lately, but also check out the original Deep Rock Galactic review I did. Certainly I'm going to be keeping an eye on this publisher for the new Valheim game that they're doing, because Valheim's another game I play with mates online, so I'm really keen to see if they can represent the theme of Valheim as well as they do here. You're on my watch list now, guys, so don't mess it up. Keep this trend going, and you could be a very popular publisher for me. So, you know, and for someone like me, who's typically the grouchy man of the internet, you know, that's got to be speaking volumes. So take care, and remember to raise a glass of Backbreaker Stout for your fellow dwarfs. Bye for now. It's only a game.